jump in at a moment's notice and take a place for those who can't be here. And we're just thankful that we have a group of men that are talented and can do that. Let's jump immediately into Daniel chapter 2. It's a huge chapter, and it'll take us a good while just to even read it. In Daniel chapter 2, we find some background on this. Priests in Babylon. In ancient Babylon, the king served as both high priest and civil ruler. That comes in play tonight. You're going to see the king is not going to be very fooled by a lot of the folks that he has in his court. He performed sacrifices and determined the religious life of his subjects. And of course, he couldn't be everywhere. The king could not personally officiate in each of the temples in his realm. He appointed substitute priests to perform the routine priestly labors. But the number one thing we need to realize, kind of like the Pharaoh in Egypt who considered himself a god, Ra, if you will, the personal personification of Ra, the Babylonian king considered himself to be the high priest. Hepatoscopy is about the best way I can say it. I looked that up and everything I had, and it gave you the pronunciation for it, but it wouldn't sound it off like it would in so many of the dictionaries. But literally, that term means liver viewing, or divination by the liver. It was an ancient method of divination used by the Hittites, the Etruscans, as well as the Babylonians. The liver was regarded as the seat of mental life, I guess what happened, they started cutting things open, animals and things of that nature, and the liver's a big blood organ. So I suppose they thought, well, this must be pretty important, so maybe that's where we think. In Ezekiel chapter 21, Ezekiel's talking about the king of Babylon. And he says, for the king of Babylon, this is Nebuchadnezzar, by the way, who he's talking about, stood at the parting of the way, at the head of the two ways, to use divination. He made his arrows bright. He consulted with images. He looked in the liver. That's how they would see things. Man, I don't get that at all. I have seen the movies where the witch lady, will throw down some bones and look at it and say something in some language you can't understand. But to look at a liver, but they have dug up things. This right up, the thing on top there is a diagram, and you can see the writing. And when they would sacrifice an animal, they would consider the god to possess that animal. And they could take the liver of that animal and compare it to these other things that they had. And they could see deformations in it, deformities and things of that nature. And they'd say, well, because this part's not quite what it ought to be, then, you read this section and it tells you, what's going to happen. I mean, they would, guys, it's kind of like palm reading. Do you think anybody can really tell your future by looking at your palm, Astrology, and I'm not talking about astronomy, where people are saying, hey, look, there's some planets and gases, and they're studying I'm talking about where people are going to tell you your future based on what the stars are doing. That's just simply not true, no more than looking at bones you throw out in a tin can on a tray, or looking at some animal's liver. Could have a cancerous liver. Of course, they would have looked at that as a sign. Here you'll see, this is probably from a Jewish person. The reason I say that, because they use the BCE, either a Jewish person or a non-believer, an atheist, because instead of using BC or AD like the known world has done for the last 1,950 years, a lot of people have tried to change BC to BCE, which is before Common Era, just using that as a time signature instead of before Christ or Anno Domini in the year of our Lord. But as you can see, this goes back way. These are clay tablets that are in the shape of livers, and you can see the one is in some kind of Syrian type script, and then you can see the one below that is a Babylonian that's almost 2,000 years before the Christ. So, we're talking about 4,000 years ago. People used to give some credit to this, and they'd even, have little places drawn on it so you could look at the liver and tell what exactly supposedly is going on. Well, the only reason I bring that up is that's what the situation that Daniel's been thrown into. He's in an area where the king thinks he's the number one priest, and that all the astrologers and things of the kingdom, that's how they do things, okay? So that's the environment. Chapter 2, verse 1, in the second year of the reign of Nebuchadnezzar, Nebuchadnezzar dreamed dreams, wherewith his spirit was troubled, and his sleep brake from him. Yes, it is true. God used to communicate to people through their dreams. Jacob's ladder comes to mind. Sometimes we don't know if Abraham was having a vision or if he was actually doing some things, but it appears some of those were visions. You know, the Bible says that God who in sundry times and in divers manners spake unto the fathers by the prophets, different times, different ways. He would use these things, and God is telling Nebuchadnezzar, he's giving him this dream, and of course this is the providence of God. Daniel is going to be like top dog on the totem pole as a result of interpreting this dream, but God is giving information that's going to be good for the Jews to have. They're going to see a whole lot of things that are going to take place. And so notice, wherewith his spirit was troubled and sleep brake from him. You ever have one of those nights when you can't sleep because your dreams are bothering you? Verse 2, then the king commanded to call the magicians, astronomers, sorcerers, and Chaldeans. Fours, this is a chapter of fours. You've got the 4 different groups of men that the king considered important in his court. You've got the 4 young Jewish boys who have been deported and are now kind of working for the king, sort of in a captive atmosphere. You're going to have the 4 explanations by the Chaldeans why they can't interpret the king. And you're going to have the 4 different kingdoms represented by the great image that we're going to find at the end of this chapter. So chapter 2 is a book of fours, chapter of fours. Magicians, astrologers, sorcerers, and Chaldeans. That's amazing that that's what the king used to learn things, but that's the case. For to show the king his dream, so they came and stood before the king. The king said unto them, I have dreamed a dream, and my spirit was troubled to know the dream. Then spake the Chaldeans to the king, and notice they speak to him in Syriac, which is Aramaic. The Chaldeans speak to the king in what basically Brother Turner from the Alabama School of Religion, that went on to be called different other names, but went on to be regions, and I can't remember the name of it now, but he would say that this was the court language. This was the kind of language that they used. And so that's significant because from this verse forward till about chapter 7, about a few verses into chapter 7, the book of Daniel is not written in Hebrew. It is written in Aramaic. And so here's your transition. Okay? O king, live forever. Tell thy servants the dream, and we will show the interpretation. The king answered and said to the Chaldeans, the thing is gone from me. Don't remember it. If you will not make known unto me the dream, wherewith the interpretation thereof, ye shall be cut in pieces. Boy, I mean, he doesn't waste any time, does he? You know, it's be a really important thing for y'all to let me know what my dream is. I'd really appreciate it. And then they say you can't, and say, well, you better. And then they say you can't. And he says, well, then I'll do something bad. He doesn't do that. He cuts right to the chase. If you don't tell me, I am going to cut you up, and your houses shall be made a dunghill. In other words, anybody in your house, going to tear down your houses, we're going to use it as a dump. And brethren, what we need to realize here is these despots, these kings in this day and time could do exactly that. No questions asked. There wouldn't have been anybody that even give any resistance. They'd have just went out and done it because the king said so. Verse 6, but if you show the dream and the interpretation thereof, you shall receive of me gifts, rewards, great honor. Therefore show me the dream and the interpretation thereof. They answered again, said, let the king tell his servants the dream, and we will show the interpretation of it. I guess that's how it's done. That's what they expected. They'd be expected to be told the dream. I remember I found a book one time, and it was in one of our old houses. Big old thick book. And, I mean, it was probably the biggest book I guess I had seen at that age. It was a really big book. And that whole thing was nothing but dreams. Dream interpretation. And if you had a dream about a dog, you know, chasing a cat at 3 o'clock in the afternoon or something, you were supposed to be able to look up dog, look up cat, and the dog chasing the cat, and it would tell you, you know, what your dreams were. Well, that's not normally, you know, I wouldn't put a whole lot of credit or something with it. It may just be you had a bad experience with a dog or something. But they want to know the dream, and of course they'll, you know, take what he says and give him something back. And he says, that ain't going to happen. He says, I know of certainty that you would gain the time. In other words, you're stalling. If I give you the dream, you're stalling. I want you to know, I want you to tell me the thing's gone from me. I want you to tell me what a dream, and I want the interpretation thereof. And notice, here's the first of that group of fours, but if you will not make known unto me the dream, there is but one decree for you. For ye have prepared lying and corrupt words to speak before me till the time be changed. Therefore tell me the dream, and I shall know that ye can show me the interpretation thereof. I appreciate what we read earlier. That's from Brother Butler's commentary on the book of Daniel. And I think that one of the reasons the king realizes these men are not capable of doing what they're supposed to be doing is because he's supposed to be the high priest. He's supposed to have these kind of, you know, be able to do things and talk to the gods and things of that nature. And I reckon he knows he can't do it. And I don't think he has much confidence in these fellas. The Chaldeans answered, said before the king, and said, number one, there's not a man upon earth that can show the king's matter. Number two, therefore, there is no king, lord, no ruler that has asked such things of any magician or astrologer or Chaldean. This has never been done before. No man can do it. It's never been done before. And it is a rare thing, number 3, that the king requireth. And number 4, there is none other that can show it before the king except the gods whose dwelling is not with flesh. You know, Daniel's going to say the exact same thing. He's going to tell, of course, he doesn't use gods in lowercase g, of course. He's talking about the God of heaven. But he's going to say, nobody can do this. Only the God of heaven. Verse 12, for this cause the king was angry, very furious, and commanded to destroy all the wise men of Babylon. And the decree went forth, and remember who's training now. Remember who's in school. Daniel and his 3 friends have been brought in. They're in training right now, probably at the end of their 2nd year, beginning of their 3rd. The decree went forth that the wise men should be slain. And they sought Daniel and his fellows to be slain. They're getting them all together to take their life. And instead of just going in and killing them, apparently they're going to kind of get them together and kill them at a later date or something. But they've come there basically to arrest them. And Daniel answered with counsel and wisdom to Arioch, the king, the captain of the king's guard, which was gone forth to slay the wise men of Babylon. He answered and said to Arioch, the king's captain, why is the decree so hasty? You know, what's going on? Why is this so hasty from the king? Then Arioch made the thing known to Daniel. Then Daniel went in and desired of the king that he would give him time, and that he would show the king the interpretation. Then Daniel went to his house and made the thing known to Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. There's our 4 boys, along with our 4 different kinds of soothsayers, if you will. They had the 4 arguments. Here's the 4 young men and his companions. Not only does he realize that the prayer of a righteous man availeth much, but if he can get his other 3 friends, you know, more people praying, more good things are going to happen. Brother, that's one of the reasons we pray as the church. That's one of the reasons we have a prayer list. Folks realize, prayer of a righteous man availeth much. Imagine what happens if I can get 110 people praying for me. That they would desire mercies of the God of heaven concerning this secret, that Daniel and his fellows should not perish with the rest of the wise men of Babylon. Then was the secret revealed unto Daniel. God gives him the information. And a night vision, or a dream itself, if you will. Then Daniel blessed the God of heaven. Daniel answered and said, blessed be the name of God forever and ever, for wisdom and might are his. He changes the times, the seasons. He removeth kings and setteth up kings. That's the theme of the book of Daniel, that God is in control. God is in control. He setteth up kings. He giveth wisdom unto the wise, and knowledge to them that know understanding. He revealeth the deep and secret things. He knoweth what is in the darkness, and the light dwelleth with him. O thank thee and praise thee, O thou God of my fathers, who hast given me wisdom and might, and hast made known unto me now what we desired of thee. For thou hast now made known unto us the king's matter. Therefore Daniel went to Arioch, and tells him, I'm ready to see the king. And he went and said unto him, destroy not the wise men of Babylon. Bring me in before the king, and I will show unto the king the interpretation. Then Arioch brought in Daniel, wherefore the king in haste, and said thus unto him, I have found a man of the captives of Judah that will make known unto the king the interpretation. Now, I don't know that he's so much blowing his trumpet or trying to put himself in the good, graces of the king. It could be that's just the way you approach the king. I read a bunch of commentators that were just all over this Arioch, saying that he was claiming that, he went out and done something spectacular. I'm not so sure that that's what's being said here. It could be the fact that he's just approaching the king and saying, listen, there's a man here, I found this man. And not that he went out investigating it, but that it's been brought to his attention. Kind of like a court, herald. That will make known unto the king the interpretation. Notice, the king answered and said to Daniel, whose name was Belteshazzar, art thou able to make known unto me the dream which I have seen, the interpretation of? Notice Daniel's answer. It's not too far different from the Chaldeans. Answered in the presence of the king and said, the secret which God hath demanded cannot the wise men, the astrologers, the magicians, the soothsayers, show unto the king. This can't be done. But there is a God in heaven that revealeth secrets and maketh known to the king Nebuchadnezzar what shall be in the latter days. That's a key phrase. If you believe in writing in your Bible, if you believe in underlining it, that is one of the places that you need to underline. Because latter days, last days, end of time, end of these days, this is a constant thing that's talking about that you'll see in prophecy. Sometimes it's talking about the judgment of God, but a lot of times it's referring to the same thing that Isaiah is talking about, an establishment of the kingdom in the last days. It's talking about the same thing that the Hebrew writer would say, but hast in these last days spoken unto us by his Son, the last dispensation, the last time frame. What shall be in the latter days? Thy dream and the visions, and the head upon thy bed are these. As for thee, O king, thy thoughts came into thy mind upon thy bed, what should come to pass hereafter. In other words, what you've seen is a vision of the future. And he revealeth secrets and maketh known unto thee what shall come to pass. But as for me, this secret is not revealed to me for any wisdom that I have. Daniel's totally given a disclaimer here. This is not from me, but this is from God. But for their sakes that shall make known the interpretation of the king, and that thou mightest know the thoughts of thine heart. Thou, O king, sawest and behold a great image. This great image, whose brightness was excellent, stood before thee, and the form thereof was terrible. It was magnificent to look at. It was beautiful, but at the same time, it was a scary thing to behold. The image's head was of fine gold, his breast and his arms of silver, his belly and his thighs of brass, his legs of iron, his feet part of iron, part of clay. Thou sawest till that a stone was cut out without hands, which smote the image upon his feet, that were of iron and clay, and brake them into pieces. Then was the iron, the clay, the brass, the silver, the gold, everything, the entire statue, broken to pieces together and became like the shaft of the summer threshing floors. That is the stuff that when they would take the wheat, put it in the big basket with like a filter thing, and they would bounce it up and down, and all the good stuff would fall out, and the chaff would just kind of blow away with the wind, the stuff that was broke up. He says that's exactly what's going to become of this statue. It's going to disappear. This stone that was cut without hands is going to smash the feet and then the entire image till it is literally ground into dust, and then it disappears. And the wind carried them away, that no place was found for them, and the stone that smote the image became a great mountain. The stone that was cut without hands, in other words, it wasn't man-made, cut without hands, it becomes a great mountain. And remember, a mountain many times in the Bible is talking about seat of authority. The mountain of the Lord's house, Isaiah chapter 2, Micah chapter 4, that's talking about power, government a lot of times. The stone that smote the image became a great mountain and filled the whole earth. This is a dream, and we will tell the interpretation thereof before the king. Thou, O king, art a king of kings. For the God of heaven hath given thee a kingdom, power, and strength, and glory. You're it. You're the man, if you will. And whithersoever the children of men dwell, the beasts of the field, the fowls of the heaven, he hath given into thine hand, and hath made thee ruler over them. Thou art this head of gold. Not too hard to figure out what that is it? Head of gold, Nebuchadnezzar. But you have 3 more body parts. And for a lot of times, and where a lot of people get into trouble, is they try to give this image 4 more body parts. It's representing 4 kingdoms. And the reason we know that is because of Daniel 7, and we'll talk about that in just a little bit. But the same kind of vision happens in Daniel 7, and it's 4 kingdoms. And history gives us 4 kingdoms. But the premillennial folks, they want to try to get a 5th kingdom down there so they can stick Europe in there. But that isn't what's going to be taking place. It says, thou art this head of gold. So we know the top part of the statue is Nebuchadnezzar. And after thee are the Babylonian, the Chaldean kingdom. After thee shall arise another kingdom, not just after him, but after the Babylonian kingdom. He's going to have a son, and then that son's going to have a son. It's going to be a couple generations before the kingdom will be taken by the Medo-Persian. It says, and after thee shall arise another kingdom inferior to thee. Nebuchadnezzar got it all. He's a ruler of the known world, if you will. But after him will rise the Medo-Persian Empire, and the Medo-Persian Empire is never able to conquer Greece. Even though they would like to, they don't. They can't. They just can't get it done. We talked about that this morning in our Sunday school lesson, where Darius tries, can't, goes back, starts saving a lot of money, dies, and gives that over to Xerxes, his son, who takes the biggest 1 million man force that had ever been put together, the biggest fleets that had ever been assembled, and attacked Greece, and still couldn't get it done. Well, this is the inferior kingdom. And the third kingdom of brass. And a lot of people read into this fact that it's brass is because the Grecian soldiers were known for wearing the brass, wearing brass helmets and brass chest plates. I just believe it's the decline of the materials. You're going from gold to a kingdom that's not so hot, which is silver, to a kingdom that's brass, and then you get down to the iron. It's just the different qualities of the materials, as the kingdoms are not quite what Babylon is going to be. And which shall bear rule over thee, and in the 4th kingdom shall be strong as iron. Now we're talking about the legs and the feet now. For as much as iron breaketh in pieces and subdueth all things, and as iron that breaketh all these, shall it break in pieces and bruise. And whereas thou sawest the feet, toes, part of potter's clay, part of iron, kind of a mixture, the kingdom shall be divided, but there shall be in it of the strength of the iron, for as much as thou sawest the iron mixed with miry clay. And as the toes of the feet were part of iron and the part of clay, so the kingdom shall be partly strong and partly broken. What he's describing there is the Roman Empire. The Chaldean kingdom, head of gold. The Medo-Persian kingdom would be the silver. The next kingdom, of course, would be the Grecian kingdom, as we'll see a lot of that in the book of Daniel as well. That's going to be Alexander the Great. And notice, I should have brought that out as I was looking at that. That kingdom, the second kingdom doesn't, but the third kingdom rules all over the world. And that's exactly what Alexander did. The Medo-Persians, the Persians were never able to capture Greece. But Alexander the Great was able to capture all of Persia. As a matter of fact, you remember him fighting the big, huge elephants in India. I mean, he was able to go over those mountains and everything. He would go down into Egypt and wipe out all the Egyptians. That's how you have Alexandria. Set up Greek culture. He was a lot like, instead of, whereas Nebuchadnezzar wanted to have a Chaldean, really loved Chaldean culture, he wanted everybody to come there, and they'd bring everybody there, and it became a great metropolis, a great city. Alexander, wherever he would go, he would make a great city, and he would make it a Hellenist city. He'd make it real Grecian and teach Greek and things of that nature, and so leave, huge libraries and so forth. But this Roman kingdom, the Roman kingdom was different than all these other kingdoms. It never was really a kingdom in the fact that it had a king. Remember, it started out as a republic, but it degenerated into where Caesar got all the authority, if you will, and it kind of, what kingdoms would do, and this was like the Jews. Little kingdoms would look at the Romans and they'd say, hey, we're over here, and these guys are going to beat us up, and we'll give you some money if you'll come protect us, And so they would basically, without even firing a shot, if you will, surrender to the Romans and saying, we'll be a part of Rome. How far and how deep do you think that ran? When the great barbaric hordes started attacking the Romans, that's about as far as it went. They didn't come to the assistance. They could, over a process of time, the degeneration of the Roman kingdom, they just weren't a solidified bunch. That's why if you went anywhere, the Romans built roads everywhere. And folks, those roads, just like the interstates in Europe, they were, they call them the Autobahn. Those were not built so you could get your BMW out and run, 100 miles an hour from town to town. Those were built to move troops and tanks and trucks from one place to another place very quickly, so that you could reinforce the Western Front if the Eastern Front was taking, didn't have a whole lot going on. You could pull troops. You could move them everywhere. Folks, that's why the Romans built roads. They had to move these legions because you constantly had uprisings. There were little kingdoms that didn't want to pay tribute anymore and things of this nature, so you needed to get legions out there. And so that's why the Romans had these roads, and it was basically the downfall of the Roman Empire. It was never really as cohesive as it would like to have been. And so hence you have strong as iron, but yet made of clay too. And we would see about 400 A.D. that it would come apart. Verse 43, and whereas thou sawest iron mixed with miry clay, they shall mingle themselves with the seed of men. In other words, you're going to have all kind of races kind of coming under this one umbrella, of the Roman Empire, but they shall not cleave one to another. And as soon as there were trouble, you just weren't going to have a whole lot of folks jumping in the battle if they could lay out of it. Even as iron is not mixed with clay. And notice Daniel 2:44. This is huge, and it might be one of those things you want to underline. And in the days of these kings, and in the days of these kings shall the God of heaven set up a kingdom which shall never be destroyed. Friends, there is not a religious group that I know out there that doesn't say and believe that this is talking about the establishment of the church, the establishment of the kingdom of Jesus Christ. They wouldn't use the word church, a lot of them wouldn't. But the kingdom, they all agree that this is talking about the establishment of the kingdom. But what we still have people having trouble today realizing is that the kingdom has already been established. In Matthew chapter 3, we have John the Baptist going around everywhere. What was he preaching? The kingdom of heaven is at hand. Jesus, after his, being tempted in the wilderness, Matthew chapter 4, verses 1 through 10 or so, about verse 17 starts his ministry, where he goes around preaching what? The kingdom of heaven is at hand. It's here. It's now. And as a matter of fact, in Matthew 16, when Peter makes that great confession that thou art the Christ, the Son of the living God, Jesus says, Blessed art thou, Simon Bar-Jonah, flesh and blood hath not revealed this unto thee, but my Father which is in heaven. And upon this, rock I will build my church. The gates of hell shall not prevail against it. And I will give unto thee the keys of the kingdom. You see, the kingdom was established on the day of Pentecost. Peter exercised those keys in Acts chapter 2. As a matter of fact, John would say he was our brother in tribulation and in the kingdom, Revelations chapter 1. Colossians 1, Paul would talk about how the sinners have been translated into the kingdom of Christ. The kingdom has been established and is established today. But most of our friends don't believe that. They don't think that Jesus Christ is ruling and reigning now. They believe that, we kind of kicked them around pretty good in debates there for several years. So they'd say, we have the kingdom in promise. They don't believe that Jesus is ruling and reigning now. They believe he's going to come back to earth and rule and reign. In Jeremiah chapter 22, if you could turn there with me for just a second, and we'll just spend, and I should have probably put it in the slides, but there's so many slides on here already. When I get up around 60, I start getting scared. If you could look at Jeremiah chapter 22 with me, or at least write that down somewhere close by in the book of Daniel. Jeremiah chapter 22, verse 24. This is a prophecy now. It says, As I live, saith the Lord. Notice the capital L-O-R-D, Jehovah God, Yahweh. Covenant name of God, though Coniah, the son of Jehoiakim, king of Judah, were the signet upon my right hand, yet would I pluck thee hence. Drop down to verse 28. Is this man Coniah despised, a broken idol, a vessel wherein is no pleasure? Wherefore they are cast out, and his seed are cast out into a land that they know not. No man is going to sit upon the throne of Coniah and prosper. And I read everything but what I should have read. Let me look that up very quickly. Because this is one of those things that you're going to see it a lot. You're going to have people tell you that Jesus is going to come back and that he is going to prosper. Well, notice verse, notice verse 28. In this man Coniah is despised, a broken idol. He is a vessel wherein is no pleasure. Wherefore they are cast out. He and his seed are cast out into a land which they know not. O earth, 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 hear the word of the Lord. Thus saith the Lord, write this man childless, a man that shall not prosper in his days, for no man of his seed shall prosper, sitting upon the throne of David and ruling any more in Judah. You see, this is an end to the kingdom being ruled by a king through the lineage of David. There's not going to be another king that's going to sit on that throne and prosper. That's exactly what this is saying. And yet Jesus Christ, as you well know, is from the seed of David. And what our premillennial friends don't understand is that it's a spiritual kingdom that Jesus is ruling and reigning over right now. We get that from Zechariah chapter 6, verses 12 and 13, where he is going to be a high priest and he's going to be the king, and the two shall be one. In other words, they're going to sit on the throne and him being a priest. Well, see, you couldn't do that under the old covenant because you got a Levite and a person from the tribe of Judah. They got to have the same job. They can't do that. But under the priesthood of Melchizedek, he can do that. But he's not going to be ruling on earth. You see, that's not to reign 1,000 years in Jerusalem, because the Bible says he can't do that. Jesus is not coming back to this earth to reign for 1,000 years. He's reigning and ruling right now, and when it's done, it's done. There will not be a rapture. There will not be 7 years of tribulation and then 1,000 years reign of Jesus Christ on the earth. That is false teaching. On the last day, the trumpet of God will sound, the angels will shout, and all of us will be called up to meet the Lord in the air. And then there will be the great day of judgment, which the goats will be on one side and the sheep on the other. But that's going to happen. Notice here in verse 44, back in Daniel. And in these days of these kings, the days of the Romans, shall the God of heaven set up a kingdom which shall never be destroyed. And the kingdom shall not be left to other people, but it shall break in pieces and consume all these kingdoms. In other words, the kingdom is going to be international. Just like in Isaiah chapter 2, verse 1, it says, and all nations shall flow into it. It's not going to be a Japanese kingdom or a Chinese kingdom or an American kingdom. It is going to be a universal kingdom where all nations. And notice, it's going to consume all these kingdoms, and it shall stand forever. It says, for as much as thou sawest that the stone was cut out of the mountain without hands, this is not something man did, and that it brake in pieces the iron, the brass, the clay, the silver, and the gold, the great God hath made known to the king, what shall come to pass hereafter. And the dream is certain, and the interpretation thereof sure. And Nebuchadnezzar knows that Daniel just hit a home run. I guess during all that, he remembered the things, some of the stuff he had seen. It says, then the king Nebuchadnezzar fell upon his face, worshipped Daniel, commanded that they should offer an oblation and sweet odors unto him. The king answered unto Daniel and said, of a truth it is that your God is a God of gods and a Lord of kings and a revealer of secrets, seeing thou couldst reveal this secret. He realizes there's no way in the world a man could have known that. I couldn't even remember it, but now Daniel has told me. Verse 48, then the king made Daniel a great man. As a matter of fact, Daniel will rise up later. He'll be one of the top 3 men in the Chaldean kingdom. Then he'll turn right around and also be a great leader in the kingdom of the Medes. Made him a great man, gave him many great gifts, made him rule over the whole province of Babylon, and chief of the governors over all the wise men of Babylon. Then Daniel requested of the king that didn't forget his buddies, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, over the affairs of the province of Babylon, but Daniel sat in the gate of the king. I want you to picture that image in your mind, if you will. The head of gold, the arms, the chest of silver, the belly and thighs of brass, and then, of course, the legs and the feet of iron, and then the feet of iron and clay mixed. This is the 4 kingdoms. It's prophesied empires. Now, what we have being taught here is what premillennialists teach. They add a 5th kingdom. You see, they've got to push it on out here. They don't believe that the kingdom was established in the first century. They think that it's Babylonian, Medo-Persian, Greece, and Rome. But see, then they get down there to those feet, and they want that to be the European Union, really now. And boy, when you got the European Euro, you know, ooh-wee, boy, I mean, there was a lot going on with the premillennialists then. They got one currency now. It's not long before they'll have one leader, and then we'll have the Antichrist. Well, brethren, that's just not there. It's just as wrong as the day is long. The dude's got 10 toes. You know why? Because we have 10 toes. I mean, it's just coincidence. Not that there's going to be 10. That's why they're the 10 member nations of the Euro. And they believe that if once this is so completely done, this one world government, that's why they're so scared of the United Nations in particular, that you're going to have the mark of the beast, the tribulation, and so forth, as they interpret the book of Revelations. That's why they had the 5th kingdom, but that's not the case. In Daniel chapter 7, we're going to see a different vision altogether. It is going to be talking about the exact same thing, but instead of having an image with a head of gold and so forth, you're going to have the image of the lion with wings. It's going to be Nebuchadnezzar. You're going to have the bear with the 2 things in his mouth. It's going to be the Medo-Persia. You're going to have the lion with the 3 heads and the wings. That's going to be Alexander the Great. And then you're going to have that great beast in the back with the 10 horns. That's Rome. That's not Europe. So you have 4 kingdoms, and that's, you know, pretty much been understood by people for centuries. So from Brother Butler's book, the statue, gold is Babylon, silver Medo-Persia, bronze is Greece, Rome, iron, and clay. And as we get into these visions, particularly verse 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, you're going to see, you're going to see how that the angel starts telling us that this is who this is talking about. And I mean, just it explains it, because right now you might be saying, well, how do we know that's what it is? Well, history tells us that's what it is. And we know the number one thing, the head there, is the Chaldeans, because Daniel tells Nebuchadnezzar straight up, that's you. And we as Christians, members of the Lord's church, can be assured that the legs and iron and clay are talking about the Romans, because in the day of those kings, when did that happen? Luke tells us that in the days of Tiberius Caesar, that's when it took place. That's the Roman kingdom. And folks, if the kingdom was not set up then, it never will be set up, because there's not going to be another Roman Empire. But you even have television shows. I've watched premillennialist shows on television where they're talking about the Roman Empire because the Pope's going to get so much powerful, and that's going to be the new Roman Empire. Just out there. Just out there. As we read this together, just remember these four kingdoms, and we'll see things that the angel and God is going to tell Daniel. And the main thing that we need to see from this is that God is telling the Jews, he's telling Daniel, hey, listen, there's going to be a lot of things take place, but I haven't forgot you. We're going to talk about Jerusalem at the end of this book as well, and some things that are going to happen to those people, and some things they can see that are going to be taking place in their lives. And God is basically telling them there's some things that are going to be happening. And you can even look for this, and I believe that's one of the reasons that they've taken Daniel from the prophets and put him in the writings in the Hebrew Bible since the first century. And that is because it points to the days of these kings. Everybody realizes that's the Roman Empire for the most part. The legs, of course. You had the millennialists that would argue with the feet. But they realized that had to take place then. And, of course, what are Jews doing today? Do they believe the Messiah came? No. They're still looking for him. They're still looking for that kingdom to be set up. So, of course, they don't believe that. And then I've got another chart here. This one's a little bit simpler, maybe not as pretty, but it kind of gives you the dates, too. The Roman Empire would pretty much come apart there in about 400 A.D. What a great long chapter. I know we did a lot of reading. Boy, I didn't want to put you through that all at once, but I don't know how else to do that. But I wanted you to see and appreciate every verse in this book. I think it's maybe one of the few times you'll even read the book of Daniel in your life. I know times is busy, but I want you to see each part of this and to realize that God raises up kingdoms. He takes those kingdoms down. He knew what was going to take place. You think about all the millions and billions of people that were involved in the wars and all the decisions of these kings throughout time, and that God's hand is in all that, providentially taking care of his people, providentially establishing the church, providentially taking care of Christians and using Christians in the gladiators' field of combat, being eaten by lions and things, to bring down that huge government of the Romans just by the blood of the martyrs in the church, to be the power and to be as long as it has been, and for God to tell us about those things. You really can see the hand of God and how the fact that God's in charge. And I know sometimes, brethren, we can get a little frustrated the way things are going in our country and not be as happy as maybe we were 100 years ago or 50 years ago as far as morality and things of this nature. But keep in mind, God's in charge. God brings down kingdoms and he raises up kingdoms. I realize what that means when a nation becomes so wicked. I see the future, but remember that there was always a remnant. God took care of them. God will take care of us. If you're here tonight not a New Testament Christian, let me encourage you. That's what this is talking about. You're seeing about 500 years of world history, 600 years of world history prophesied hundreds of years before most of it would take place, and God is saying, I'm going to set up this kingdom. This is what y'all need to be looking for. During the days of this kingdom, during the days of these kings, I'm going to set up this kingdom, and all men shall flow into it. All men can be saved from their sins. Peter would use those keys to open up the doors to that kingdom and let the floodgates come in for anyone who wanted to obey the gospel. And there's the plan of salvation, as simply as it can be put. People heard the good news that Peter preached on that day. They believed it. They were motivated to repent of the fact that they had killed the Christ. And then they were told to be baptized based on their repentance, be baptized for the remission of sins, and that the Lord would add them to the church. He'd add them to the kingdom. They would be a part of that kingdom that's prophesied here 600 years before it's going to take place. If you haven't taken advantage of that, if you're not a New Testament child of God, then please do so. Don't put it off any longer. You don't know that you'll have tomorrow. If we can help you in any way, we encourage you to come as together we stand and sing.